Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hi, Dina. Hi, Yafa. How are you?
How are y'all doing?
Awesome. What a week, huh? Sliding into the holidays. All sorts of things going on with COVID. It's like just crazy. So I'm really excited to cover this topic tonight, which some people know about, some people don't. I'm Jackie Glazer, and I'm a former psychologist from Australia. Now I work with Olami. I'm also a life coach. And I'd like to also welcome Adina Stillerman, co-founder of Yehudi and senior educator for Partners in Torah. Hi, Adina. Welcome back.
Hi.
And Yafa Palti, who's a big influencer as well as a life and relationships coach also. So I think we've got a good team in the room to really tackle such an important topic of mental health. With everything going on in the world, with COVID and lockdowns, and everything's just spiked. I don't know about where you guys are. You're both in Florida. I'm in California. It's gone right up. Everyone's locked down. And again, we're going through a second round. But now everyone's tired, and there's job loss, and there's stress, and everyone's been doing Zooms from school at home, and particularly the experience of isolation. So millions of people all at the same time are suffering, and they're experiencing challenges to their mental health in unprecedented ways. So without further ado, let's get live and real. So I want to just open up with a few statistics, which is the idea that, if it's going to come up on a slide in a minute, that depression is actually the leading cause of disability worldwide. Did you know that? That according to the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, depression is actually the leading cause of disability. It's mind-boggling. And anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the US, affecting 40 million adults. So this is not a small thing that, like, some people think mental health, just as a psychologist, I know how people share with me that, no one else feels like this and only I feel like this. It's just not true. Let's just blow that out of the water right now. So I just wanted to mention that. The other part that's unbelievable, and I want to hear your opinion. Anxiety disorders are highly treatable, yet only 36.9% of those suffering actually receive treatment. So there's still this feeling around that I shouldn't really go and get treatment, or I shouldn't really, get help until God knows what happens. So I hit rock bottom, because on some level there must be some sort of stigma. And I think that really today, the goal of today and us talking about it is just to talk about the fact that there's nothing wrong with getting help. It's important, it's crucial, and it's out there waiting for people. And I just want to also make a disclaimer that today is also talking about not just anxiety disorders, but mental health is a whole continuum, all the way from feeling a little stressed to anxious. Anxiety disorders and clinical depression is one level of the spectrum, but there's a whole range within mental health here of how we're responding to our circumstances in life. So I just want to throw open to you guys, what are your thoughts? How has this whole COVID and different circumstances that we're all facing together, how's that affected you, your mental health you've seen?
Heavy, loaded question, that's for sure. Adina, do you want to go first?
Yes, go for it, Yafa. Go for it.
So I know the truth is, I don't think there's anyone in the world who hasn't been affected. And I think if somebody hasn't been affected, then the whole point is missing on them. Okay. I think that the reason all of this is happening is so that we are affected somehow, and we learn from it, and we pick up on the messages that are being sent our way. So I think we've all been affected. For me personally, I'm a big extrovert, and I thrive on people and on being social and on seeing people. And for me, it was very, very difficult to have to be so isolated, and that all of my social encounters are through a screen now, So to me, that has been, I think, the biggest struggle, the biggest part of this for me. Of course, all the other things also, I think most of us are struggling in some way with our livelihood, and, we were all affected some way. But if we're going to take, what my biggest one was, definitely social. I'm a big hugger. I love to hug people. I love to be in personal, close contact. And that's something that's been hard for me.
Oh, I was lost at when you first started off, Yafa. You're like, I'm an extrovert, and I realized I think I'm an introvert, because I welcomed the opportunity to hide in my cave and have an excuse to hide in my cave. That was And I keep thinking, like, I hope I don't have to.
I'm sorry. I think the problem for introverts is that you were surrounded by all the people, though. Like for an extrovert, for me, it was hard to be in my home because I wanted to be outside with everyone. You wanted to be in your home, but you had all the people in there with you.
No, I like being with my kids. I like being outside my home. But I think the touching thing really bothered me also. I have this awful, I think I'm going through like PTSD. Like if anybody comes near me, even, I pull away. But I do think that I've appreciated my family more because I don't know what I would be like if I were single without children. I have my own social life inside my home, and I really have a lot of compassion for people who are genuinely alone, elderly people. So it hasn't necessarily affected my anxiety, but I have seen it has infected a lot of other people in terms of feeling just so alone. It makes you appreciate the familial structure. That it's like you've got your best friend living with you, and a lot of little best friends living with you as well. And you feel like you're there. There's a purpose.
I think it's also, Adina, I think it depends on your relationships, because people who are stuck at home with even people who are stuck at home with their family, if they have family at home and they're not alone, whatever those dynamics are in the relationship with the family gets exaggerated and exacerbated when there's no resolution. So people used to mix up the day, going to work, going to school, having other interactions, and then come back home. So unless you really are on top of all your relationships and everything's peaceful and everything's good, it exacerbates some of the problems there, which is a good opportunity to work on them, but sometimes it can be a bit intense.
Totally.
I think some people, people who had a really healthy dynamic at home, like a really great marriage, I think their marriage got stronger. People who had a difficult marriage or difficulty with their children, I think that got exacerbated as well.
Right.
So that's why each interaction really was different. I personally I felt so bad for people who had, children at home with special needs, or, God forbid, if there was anyone in an abusive situation or neglectful situation. Those were the things that pulled at my heartstrings the whole time. That must have been very difficult for people.
Yeah, and for me at least, I think it was. I feel a little bit suffocated, like just getting out. Like I just want to get out of my house. Like thank God, I love where I live and I love the family I'm here with, but I just need to get out and have a different stimulation. It's for me, it's like cabin fever, I guess, a little bit. So I feel more suffocated, and also because like help won't come by, and you don't get as much help with friends and people or whatever it is. Everything's on me, at least. Also, my husband had back surgery, so that was an extra in the middle.
You're right. Oh, that is really challenging.
It was really challenging. And so I guess like because the whole point of this Souled Live and Real is that we don't just talk about the problems and the difficulties and the challenges, that we talk about the challenges with the spiritual glasses on. Like, let's put on the spiritual lenses and let's look at what is the spiritual view, or the soulful view, get sold of what's going on. And one of the things I think we mentioned another show was, what we don't say why is this happening to me? Lama in Hebrew is why. We say lama, same letters but different meaning. For what purpose? What can we get out of this? What is this coming to teach us? What can we work on? What are the opportunities? And one thing that I think is so unique about the time we're living in now is that normally people go through their lives with their own challenges, ups and downs, in their own unique pace and way. And here, even though everyone's experiencing it differently, we're all facing the same circumstance at the same time of COVID. So like what's really clear, like what's the common thread if we put our spiritual glasses on? Everyone has been forced to look within. Like no matter what it is, like all the distractions externally have been completely stripped away from us against our will. And nothing is in our control anymore. So anyone who had control stuff going on was forced to deal with like, oh my God, I'm out of control. Like literally, oh my God, right? Oh my God, I'm out of control. What do I do when life doesn't go the way I want it to? What does it do when I can't just plan? I mean, we had all sorts of trips booked and tickets. We had to cancel everything. So like when your life is thrown into chaos against your will, against your choice, how do we respond to that? And that's really what I wanted to discuss today, or like bring up to discuss, because we can't change what happens to us in life ever, right? It's out of our control. A lot of this is out of our control, if not most of it. We can only change responses. And that's what I felt was worthy of a real discussion tonight, is how do we maybe choose differently, and can we choose differently, in certain ways. And again, this is different to people. I just want to make a really, really important disclaimer. This is not talking about people who are suffering from clinical biochemical depression who need to be on medication. We all support that 100%. It's not about severe anxiety disorders. You should take all the medical advice and guidance. And on top of that, all the things we're discussing tonight will help too for anyone on any level of the spectrum. But I just want to say that this is not the spiritual approach. We include the medical, physical, and all the normative ways of treatment. So just opening up with that, like one of the responses that we can have to circumstances like this is we can either choose to strengthen and say, what can I get out of this? Or we can sort of feel impacted by it and go into, I think you guys call it the Debbie Downer in America, the Debbie Downer syndrome, when you just spiral down, and based on what you're thinking and based on how you're responding in your own world, you can literally affect your whole state, either positive or completely dark, right? Dark. We've all been in that place at different times in our life where it just feels hopeless. You just want to give up. It's just, I feel sad. I feel despairing. And often we don't like to acknowledge that maybe I have something to do with that. Maybe I have some contribution to make to that state that I'm feeling, even though the circumstance I can't change. And so when we look at responding to life, there's different levels of response. There's mental, emotional response. There's a physical response. What can I do physically to change my state and to how I feel and my mental health? All these things affect our mental health: physical, emotional, mental, and of course we'll get to spiritual. So just opening up to, let's talk about the mental. I know, Adina, you mentioned to me once before offline that there's one specific way you connect into sort of letting yourself feel good. Like it plugs you back into feeling good without fail. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
I think you're talking about the story that I told you about the chief rabbi. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, life purpose. About life.
I remember we spoke about this. This is such a beautiful story, and it's so meaningful to me because he just passed away. So I feel like I've told this story a few times, but this is the first time I'm telling the story when I'm speaking about someone who made such an indelible impression on me personally, and he's no longer with us. So I'm hoping that this story will actually enhance his legacy, and his stories will live on in his memory.
This Chief Rabbi Sachs,
Jonathan Sachs, exactly, who just recently passed away. I was lucky to be able to have a meeting with him and just 10 or 15 other people in his dining room. We were in his dining room. They served British fish balls for everybody to eat. And we had a question and answer session with him when we used to work for Ace UK in London. And it was such a special experience. And one person asked a very telling question. She said, how do you know what your purpose is in this world? How do you know? Like, there's no lightning bolt. We're not born with a tag coming out of our back that says like how to care for and what our purpose is. Although it would be very convenient if that was so. Do we have to spend a lifelong endeavor to figure out what it is that we're here for? So he said, imagine you have a grid. And on the left side of the grid, make a list of all of your talents and your capabilities and the things that you enjoy. If you have money or good looks or wisdom, acting skills, singing, business acumen, put it all on the left side. On the top, make a list of all of the needs in the world, the needs in your family, the needs in the community. There he is. The needs in the community, the needs in the world, your personal world or the world at large. And make on that grid, draw a line, and where you see the left side meets the right side, there's one line that's going to be point on the grid where you see that your needs or the needs in the world meet your talents and your skills. Where they join that's where your tafkid is. That's where your purpose is. And he said, and how you know that you've hit it? Because it feels so good to be there, and the feeling doesn't go away.
Wow. It's amazing that you said that, Adina, because I never heard that in his name. And I always refer to that as the intersection of greatness.
I love that.
That intersection of my needs and the community's needs. And I love that you just told that to me in his name, because it validates the point so much. And it's true. That's the place where you feel so fulfilled. You feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. There's no feeling like it. That's such a great point.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't really, so if you tap into that place, that no matter what's happening around you, that kind of gives you this sort of energy and gives you this positivity that you can kind of deal with anything. Is that what you, is that, it's just applying, connecting it here to mental health that,
I was going to say that I think that we all have dreams and aspirations, and we don't necessarily know what's going to make us feel good in the long run. You know, we have quick fixes, and we have these aspirations of being famous or being rich, and these things, especially statistically, have proven that they don't actually make us feel good in the long run. When you wake up in the morning and you feel that you have a purpose, a sense of purpose, and you're actually actualizing that purpose, you're working on the job, you're on the field. There's something about that is, I feel, is somewhat of an inoculation to the downtimes. It keeps you up. It doesn't mean that we're completely immune. It just means that I think we start on a higher bar, and it's harder to fall often. And when we do fall, we have something to go back to. It's from a personal perspective. I know that I always wanted to be an actress. That was my dream. You know, as a little girl, I don't know, I look like the girl from My Girl. I don't know if you remember this film, but it was late 1980s. Someone named Anna Chlumsky was the star of the film. And if you look at me when I was 9 years old, I looked exactly like her. My hair was in a pony and I had wispy hair coming in the front, to the point that 3 people on separate occasions asked for my autograph thinking that I was Anna Chlumsky. Wow. In your mind, like, oh, I wish I could be this famous movie star one day. And of course, 1 million people want to be, for every 1 million people who want to be famous, one person actually makes it. So nobody should ever think that I was talented enough to ever make it in that field anyway. So forget about that. There you go. Okay, so should I put my hair up and you see that? That's Anna Clemson. It's great that they're bringing up these slides. Thank you. Totally know. Cricket, but I think that now I am an actress. I have a skill. I'm using it, but I'm using it in the way that the world needs it most, which is to connect people, not to allow people or distract people to escape from reality, but to connect them to the deepest sense of reality. And I don't think I would be happier doing anything else. I don't think I'd be happier.
Well, even just as a wife and mother, we have to be actresses. You know,
yeah, 100%. There's no doubt about it.
The greatest talents, you know, there's no question.
It's so interesting. There was one of my favorite, like talking about, this is really a lot about perspective, right? When you have things in perspective, then life can't hit you as hard, you know? So one of my favorite things that has challenged me really is that there's the reality and there's expectations of how we think things should go mentally. And then the difference is the level of suffering, right? So if I expect life to go this way, I want to be an actress, I want to be rich, and then life doesn't happen that way. So the level of suffering I experience is very big, right? But if I can also deal with reality of what's going on, it's not what I'm meant to be doing, or it's not going to bring me happiness, then I can minimize that difference between what I expect to happen and then what actually is happening. And it's really interesting because we continue going through life that way, I think, where we keep expecting or wanting things to be a certain way, and then life either happens that way or it doesn't. And we get to choose then, how do we respond? You know, Sheryl Sandberg wrote that brilliant book, Option B, right? Where she shot to fame with this is unbelievable. She shot to fame with Lean In, which I know a lot of people know about, which is about being a woman and being powerful and having it all. And she really does have it all and did have it all, and CEO of Facebook. And then all of a sudden, as soon as she was in the spotlight, all of her husband unfortunately literally passed away on a treadmill. And she literally fell, and her whole life fell apart from the most deepest, darkest way. And she built herself and rose to the challenge and chose to give back in a new way. And she called her second book Option B, What Happens in Life When Option A Doesn't Work Out. And both were just so, here it is, beautiful. Both were juxtaposed. And, you know, in Hebrew, the word for test in Hebrew is nisayon, right? Nisayon means test. And it comes from the root word nisayon, nes. Nes means miracle, but it also means flag or banner. And what is the connection? When we know in Hebrew, when there's the same word means two different things, they're deeply connected in essence. So nes, we know it means it's a miracle when we get through such a dark time like that. It feels miraculous that we got through it, right? Especially if we got through it and we somehow became stronger. And then when I get through it, I can become a flag or a banner to the rest of the world in that very exact test. So sometimes our darkest times, according to the Jewish perspective, our darkest times end up propelling us into the lightest of the light, which is so apt for Hanukkah, which is what we're sitting in right now. Right? Hanukkah is about transforming the darkness into light. And when we go through a test, which we're all in now, we're all in our own versions of different levels of darkness. And we go through that test and we strengthen Lama. What's this for? What can I use it for? And we find a light in it somehow, in some way, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. We can become a flag or banner or a light to the rest of the world. And that's what Sheryl Sandberg did. And I just think it's phenomenal, because a lot of it is in here. And it's how we respond to our doorbells, how we respond to our challenges and go with the flow.
I was about to say, you opened up by saying the word control. Remember, you were saying how everybody feels so out of control with their lives now. That's it. It's a humbling feeling and it's a good muscle to practice. You know, to keep flexing. It's a good muscle flexing, like just, it's not in my control. It's just not.
Right. And that's the test in life. The test in life is to be able to go with that flow of what's happening when we're not in control, which we'll get to. We'll get to that, because that is the spiritual perspective of surrender, let go, let God. A lot of people have talked about this. What's interesting when you were talking, Adina, was there was a book that I was reading that talked about the set point of happiness, that there's a set point of happiness that we all have inside of ourselves. And that set point is there, just either you're born with it or you were raised with it or whatever it is about how positive you are or your response to life in general. And if you don't work on it, that set point just stays there the whole time, right? And so they did these amazing studies with people who won the lottery. So everyone thinks, oh, if I won the lottery, then I'd be happy, right? Then I could afford, all my worries would go away, I'd be happy. So they did this amazing study where they found that after people won the lottery and they examined them, and they saw like how happy they were roughly before they won the lottery. When they won the lottery, obviously it peaked when they won the lottery. They found, I think it was between 6 months to 1 year after they won the lottery, their set point of happiness was right back down to the same place as it was before the lottery, which is astounding, because
crazy.
That wouldn't be me. Of course not. Right. So what's the muscle that harvests happiness? Can you guess? What is the practice that would lift your set point of happiness?
Perspective, gratitude.
Yes, gratitude. That's what they said. Gratitude. Yes, you can tell Yap is a life coach, right? Gratitude. Is awesome. Gratitude.
You tell that I'm not a life coach.
You're happy.
I need a life coach.
Yeah, we'll both hire Yaffa after the show.
Yaffa, we're bartering. Okay.
Adina, we live in the same city.
I know.
Time
management.
I'm not going to hear that now. What?
Time management would be nice if you want to help me out with that one.
Okay.
So yeah, totally right. Like the more we practice gratitude, the more we lift our set point of happiness. It's like literally like a muscle, like pushing weight. So even in the darkest time, at any given moment, there are so many blessings around us. There's so many gifts we always have, always, even just being alive in this day and age, and the fact that we have food to eat, and like there's so many blessings. And so if we stop for a minute and find that gratitude, especially and even when we're feeling down and dark and hard and stressed and whatever, so that will also lift that set point of happiness. So I think that's a really important point that I wanted to touch on. Let's move now to self-care and physicality or physical response. There's a lot we can do physically to change our state and our response to our own mental health. What do you guys do if you're having a bad day, or like, I don't know, mental health day? Like I call it mental health day, literally, if I'm just having a bad day and I just need time out, or I need to do some sort of self-care. And the second question is, when does self-care is such a buzzword, so I wanted to bring it up, but self-care, when does it become selfish? Am I allowed to say that?
No, I love that question. Love that.
Okay, good. Phew. Okay, love to hear.
No, it's an important question because the line is very blurred.
Yeah.
Self-care and self-love have all been very confused with self-obsession today. And it's right. And when it becomes self-obsession, then it's not actually self-love at all. We're actually not allowing ourselves to give ourselves what we need. We're kind of feeding into the something that's external to us that we think we need in that moment. So, so I think it's a great question, and I think that we definitely should cover it. But just to answer, Adina, if you don't mind, I'll jump in terms of self-care. So it's a tough question. I think a lot of people think self-care just means going for manicures and going to the spa and that kind of stuff, which of course we couldn't do a lot of during lockdown, during everything. And people kept feeling like, what else am I supposed to do for my self-care? So some of us started making TikTok videos. That's self-care. Fun, I like so
can we pull up one of your TikTok videos once they're pulling up all these surprise slides?
They're not actually on TikTok. I just do them on Instagram Reels because I cannot manage that many platforms. But just in other words, I think that it's really important to use your creativity. Whatever your creativity is, there's lots of things. If we're giving personal examples, a lot of things that I got back into over quarantine that I haven't been doing before. I just didn't have the time for it, or didn't make the time for it. And now suddenly, I got back into music. I'm a music composer, but I haven't composed music in about 15 years, literally, not exaggerating. And I got back into that. And again, videos, like creativity. I started walking. I'm not an exerciser at all, but I started going out every day to walk. You have to just to see that there's a world out there beyond your four walls. And I found that to be life-changing. I'm not an athlete, not running. I started this movement on Instagram called the slow walking movement. Okay. Literally walk as slow as you possibly can. People send me their videos of I'll join. Toddlers. What? You're joining? Come on in. But again, this is not about weight. We spoke about healthy body image all the time. This is totally not about weight. It's about health, mental health more than anything else. But as a bonus, during this slow walking movement, I happen to have lost 10 pounds of the 30 that I gained in quarantine. So it helps. It's all over, all around. It's helpful. So that's, for me, what I do. In other words, for my self-care, I use my creativity. In whatever way, I'm making sure that my brain is stimulated and that my creative side comes out, and that I get physical movement. Some people are going to say that they're getting more sleep. Maybe they need more sleep. I'm not the right person to talk about sleeping healthy or eating well. Why? We're on my...
There she is. I knew they were up to no good. I could feel it. The
one on the right with the donut on my nose. That one I just posted yesterday.
Oh, that's so good. How to eat a donut. Okay.
Oh, you can't hear the sound.
Is there a good visual? No.
Well, she chomps into the donut, so that's enough of a good visual for me.
Exactly. It's
powdered sugar all over your face. That takes a lot of courage to do that in front of your 20,000 followers.
And you know what? Sometimes I get these messages from people saying, oh my gosh, you're so brave. I bumped into somebody, by the way, recently in the kosher supermarket. She said, you have so much confidence. How do you do all that? And that makes me think to myself, should I not have confidence? Am I embarrassing myself? Did I do something that embarrassing that it takes that much confidence to do what I'm doing? And then sometimes I just feel like, who cares?
I think that's what people admire, Yafa. People admire that you have that sort of, it's like a robust, internal sense of yourself that people admire, because it is fun. That's what makes it funny, because there's just such a natural ease with you, and it's funny, and people can laugh at themselves, and I think it's amazing. Wait, I have a question though, because Yafa, I don't know if I got it. And Adina, I also want to hear your thoughts on it. Well, so when do you slip from self-care to self-absorption or self-obsession, or what's the indicator to us, to yourself? When do I know if it's too much self-care?
Well, I think that really with any healthy balance in life, if we see that it's taking over our priorities in life, am I so involved with myself, with my own feelings, with my own needs, that I'm not actually able to be the wife that I need to be, the mother that I need to be, the friend that I need to be, the daughter that I need to be, whatever it is. Am I allowing my feelings to actually control my life in a way that I'm not functioning, or that I'm too focused on my needs, or whatever it is? I'm just, you can insert your own example. then we know that it has become self-obsession, right? Defining self-love. It's a hard concept to describe. What does self-love actually mean? What am I giving to myself? What am I doing to myself? So I'll tell you the way I define, this is my own definition of self-love. I would love to hear if you agree or disagree. And this is how we can see whether or not we're becoming self-obsessed. So self-love to me means to see yourself the way God sees you. You know, when we look at ourselves, we very often see ourselves through different filters of insecurity, filters of inadequacy, of comparison, you know, and so many different negative things, low self-esteem that we put up. And those are the filters with which we view ourselves. And then those aren't an accurate way to see ourselves, again, because they're through filters. When God looks at us, how does he see us? We say this every morning. In our morning prayers, we say, Elokani shama shenatata bi. God returned my soul this morning, my pure, holy, beautiful soul. Every morning, he gives it back to us with those words, because that's how he sees us, as pure, beautiful souls. And if we would be able to relate to ourselves as the essence of who we are from within, by the good that we do, because all of us can look at ourselves as the negative. How many times at the end of the day do you sit back and think, oh, I was such a lousy wife today, I was such a lousy mother, I was such a bad friend, I was such a bad daughter, whatever it is, right? I didn't do the things I should have done. I didn't respond well. I didn't react well. We beat ourselves up and we start viewing ourselves with that negativity. But if we can stop and recognize the essence of who we are, that we're actually good people and we're pure people, and that's how God sees us, then that's the self-love. The self-obsession comes from an external view of ourselves. We're not pretty enough. We're not popular enough. I'm not skinny enough, whatever it is, right? I'm not perfect enough in any way. That's an external view of myself, and that becomes self-obsession. And when our self-care is wrapped around the external part of ourselves, again, that's the obsession, and that's not self-love, because we can never feel loved like that, because we're never enough. We're not enough for ourselves, and we're not enough in the eyes of other people in our perspective. We think we're not enough in anyone else's eyes. But when we come with the approach of true self-love from within, then it's not self-obsession. It's true self-love, and the self-care comes from an internal place. Does that make sense?
That is so beautiful.
Beautiful and deep. Adina, what are your thoughts on self-care? How do you
thinking about what Yafa said? It's so beautiful, especially in the way like God sees us. We have so many layers. It's so hard to strip away those layers, you know, like we see ourselves, even the labels that we give ourselves in our career, you know, we think that this is just who we are. What's the second question people ask you? What's your name? What do you do? Or where you're from, what state you're from. It's so hard to strip away those layers. I think that the concept of self-care has to be looked at from the perspective of the fact that we need to develop ourselves as givers, not receivers and takers. And imagine like turning on the tap. How do you say that in American? You can tap in England. How do you say the faucet, right? You turn on the faucet.
I'm like, yeah, the tap. And then I realized that Australians say the same thing.
You know what I'm talking about, Jackie. You know what I'm talking about, right? So you turn on the tap, but if you don't have the stopper closed, then you're just pouring in all that self-care and you're not feeling full, and you never will feel full, because it's coming in and it's going out. But if you're filling yourself up, in order for you to have the intention of spilling over onto others, that you're fortifying yourself so that you can feel needed in this world. So then everything that you fill in, everything that you put in is retained as usage for when you can give to the world. But we must look at ourselves as primed for givers. We have to see ourselves in that context, because we'll never be able to feel full unless we do.
Yeah, so that ties into the idea of self-care versus when I do self-care enough to fill myself up enough so that I can keep giving, then it's really self-care. But if I'm just doing it just to feel good and it's just because it's focused on me, that turns into that self-absorption. So we have a question actually from Netta, who just wrote in, who said, how do you get creative with self-care? Yafa mentioned getting creative with self-care. How do you get creative with your self-care? What does that really mean?
I actually had to take a DBT course with a teenager for a short period of time as their sit-in foster parent, and I got to learn a lot. And they have this like self-care box that they were supposed to make, and you put things into the box that make you feel good about yourself, that calm you down, especially if someone who's prone to anxiety. And you go to that box, and they asked us to put different things in. And it was fascinating to see what a whole room of teenagers, like 10 teenagers, what they put in their boxes and what made them feel their like safe spot, that made them feel like, this is what I'm caring for myself because I know I'm going through a hard time right now. And one woman put in, one of the girls put in like a little stuffed animal that was representing her pet. So like connection and touch is a form of self-care. Like going to someone that loves you and saying, "Can I have a hug?" is it's human connection, human touch is so important when it comes to keeping ourselves full. Which goes back to the Corona issue, right? How I feel so bad for people who are alone and are not in quarantine with other people. I can't imagine how alienating it is. Someone had nail polish in, moisturizers, music, her iPod, different things that just fill us up. And you know what's something interesting? Learning. Yeah. Learning is a form of self-care. It's feeding the mind. We are so overfed information in today's world, and we're starving for wisdom. And learning is what feeds the soul in some of the deepest levels. You ever, like, I'm assuming like a lot of viewers out there are thinking to yourself, like, this is why I'm tuning in right now. It's because this makes me feel good. It's a form of self-care.
Learning, like learning what learning?
Learning, expanding your wisdom, Jewish wisdom. Expanding learning is a form of self-care. For me, it's definitely my go-to.
100%. Yeah. Can't underestimate our intellectual capacity, And can I just, on that note, Adina, can I add something in? Is that okay with both of you? Just because it's really apropos about Hanukkah, which we're in the middle of celebrating right now. So, and this is the fourth night of Hanukkah, so it's really about tonight. Because the power, the energy in the fourth night of Hanukkah, there's a different power every night. I'm actually posting it every single day on my Instagram if anybody wants to follow along. Every day I post what the power is for that night, what we pray for when we light the candles. So for tonight, the energy is actually about in the 4 dimensions of a human being, which are the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, and the spiritual.
We're right on point. Unbelievable. We're right on
point. And here's an interesting observation that I had a number of years ago, which I'd love to share with you. This is in regarding the famous game of dreidel that we all know, the dreidel that we spin. It has the 4 letters on it. The Hebrew letters are Nun, Gimel, Hey, and Shin, which we know stand for Nes Gadol Hayasham, which means a big miracle happens over there, right, during this time. But I would like to offer an alternate explanation or idea, understanding of what the Nun, Gimel, Hey, and Shin can stand for. And that can be the Nafshi, Gashmi, Hashem, and Sichli, which are all 4 the dimensions of self. Nafshi is the emotional, Gashmi is the physical, Hashem, the spiritual, Sichli, the intellectual. And the idea is that when we spin, when we take life, when life spins us out of control, which is kind of what's happening right now, it takes us for a spin. We need to know that we have to have a proper, there we go, like the dreidels. We need to have a proper balance. All of those 4 dimensions have to live in harmony. When it lands on the nun, it lands on the emotional, but we neglect the physical and the intellectual and the spiritual, we're going to experience an imbalance in life. And I think that whenever we're experiencing an imbalance, that's the time to stop and think, am I living in harmony in all 4 dimensions of myself, right? Am I taking care of my emotional? If we neglect even one of them, that's what causes life to spin. That's what causes an imbalance. So I just wanted to throw that in, that we have to take evaluation, we have to take stock of ourselves. How am I doing physically? Am I doing what I need to do to keep myself well and healthy physically? How am I doing intellectually? How am I doing spiritually? How am I doing emotionally? And that's how we kind of have to make that assessment for ourselves.
I love that, Yafa, that what we came up with mental health aligns with the dreidel. Like, who would have thought? Like, I never in a million years. So that's amazing because it ties into Hanukkah. I want to just go deeper, like, because that's really what I think also is that we put on those spiritual glasses and we a little bit more underneath the surface. So we talk about how do you manage anxiety, what's the Jewish view. I think what's really crucial is the spiritual connection. And so that's the idea that if we take a step back and look at like what is the root cause of a lot of anxiety in the world, just like I'm talking about normal great anxiety that we all feel, it's a type of a disconnection. And it turns out, according to the Jewish view, that there are two different universes inside of us, two different worlds. And these two worlds have completely different profiles and experiences. They physically it's the same world we're in, but emotionally, internally, and spiritually, they're different universes. And these two worlds are the world of connection and the world of disconnection. The world of connection is a world of intimacy and closeness, and we feel that joy where we're connected to everything. We're in sync with our life. I feel calm. I feel centered. I'm at peace. And it's a force of building in the world. When I build something, I want to make a difference. I want to change people. I want to impact. I want to give. The world of disconnection is, I think they've got a slide to come up too. The world of disconnection is a world of fear. It's a world of isolation, a world of loneliness, a world of worry, and a world of anxiety. And as a psychologist, I was very curious about this. When I first ever started learning anything Jewish, this is what caught my eye, this exact model, which is the idea that I always was like, wow, what is the spiritual approach to anxiety? And this is actually from Rav Volba. Rav Shlomo Volba was a very big rabbi, particularly with personal growth. It's called Musar and personal development. And this is what inspired me. He said, you can't get rid of anxiety permanently because it's always there in potential. You can always move into the world of disconnection, even whether you're aware of it or not, right? There's always this two worlds in potential that we can be in, and we move between the two in the blink of an eye, whether we're aware of it or not. And he said, you can't get rid of the anxiety completely. He said, you can only build up the muscle to live in the world of connection. And to the degree that you live in the world of connection, to that degree, you won't ever experience anxiety because they're like a seesaw. They can't coexist, right? To the degree that I feel love, I will not feel fear. To the degree that I feel fear, I won't feel love. They can't coexist at the same level. So instead of trying to get rid of anxiety, like very Western mindset that we all have, is to try to fix the problem. Let's go in and try and fix the problem. Sometimes he says you can't, Ariel, that's awesome. Learning has become my go-to. Yay. And she's a real soul girl. She's amazing. You can't get rid of it in the sense of like that it's gone forever. And I noticed that as a psychologist, that's true too in the psychological world. We have lots of techniques to behavior modification, calm yourself down, respond, cope, and really manage anxiety very well. But it's always there in potential. And this is the spiritual or Kabbalistic view. Why? Because the reality of the world is everything is one, right? Hashem Echad. We talk about this with Shema. That's why we focus on the fact that everything is connected. Hashem Echad means everything is connected. There is only connection. And there are times in life then that I will disconnect from that connection. And that's when I get to feel alone. And that on a deeper level, if you really tune into the feeling, it's a sort of like it's a sense of isolation. You know, when you feel like no one loves me, I'm so bad at everything, and your head noise starts going really negative, or hopefully that's not just me, but everyone relates to what I'm saying, right? That you start getting negative, and then your friend's like, well, what are you talking about? That's not reality. Where are you going? What world are you living in, right? You know, that this is not reality check. That's why we need friends, right? Right, and mentors. Come back to reality. It's not reality. We can literally take ourselves out of the world, out of this world of connection, right? And it says also the Torah, Perkei Avos, ethics of our fathers, also says other things that take us out of the world, like jealousy and desire and anger and all these things, all these other traits live in the world of disconnection. They're all things that disconnect us. And what blew me away is that when you look at, again, we look into the Hebrew for the essence of the meaning of things. So if you look at the word Torah, the word Torah literally means instructions, right? It's just literally means, here's some instructions for how to live life. Oh, you want to live in the world of connection? I'm going to show you a pathway of how you get there. What's the word for pathway in Hebrew? It comes from the root to go. The word to go is Yafa?
Lelech.
Lech, yeah, lech. So halacha, which is the going or the pathway, is literally a pathway to the world of connection. That the idea is that the mitzvahs, the word, we know all these classic words usually in Judaism, but they don't usually mean this, what I'm talking about now. The word mitzvah comes from the root sav, which we know means commandment, but it also means connection. Literally, there's 613 connectors that connect you into the world of connection. And to the degree that I'm connected to 3 categories, to that degree, I'll live literally in the world of connection. And that those three categories are connection to self, connection to others, and connection to a higher power. To the degree that I'm connected to myself and others in a higher power, to that degree, I'll live in the world of connection, Hashem Echad. And it's so interesting because, again, when you hear the word like sin or avera, right? Avera means sin or chet means sin. It usually sort of, you feel like, oh, I'm a bad person, I'm a bad Jew, or guilt trips, right? Like, it's none of that. When you look at the word avera, it literally means you passed it, you missed it from the root avir, you missed it, you went off track, right? Chet, we know also, chet means literally off target. You fell into the world of disconnection. And so everyone wants to feel connected. When I feel fully connected, I do not feel anxious. I do not feel depressed, right? I don't. It just cannot coexist. The light and the darkness cannot coexist. If I want to bring in a little bit of deeper Kabbalah that I don't know anything about, but I'll just share with you the little piece I know, which sort of is that what is the world of can I do this? Yeah. What is the world of disconnection when the reality is that everything's connected? Why is it I feel so dark when really the reality of life is everything is connected, right? Everyone knows that. That's why we focus on the Shema. We focus, everything's connected, everything's within Hashem, everything's within God, everything's within a higher power. It's so hard to remember that sometimes because sometimes it's so dark and so real. So what is that world of disconnection? It turns out it's when I step out of alignment with the light or with the world of connection. When I step out of alignment, the result is this dark disconnection. So I have no idea what I just told you, right? No idea. It's too complicated. Someone once told me this is a very simple metaphor that's not even a metaphor, it's a literal, which makes much more sense, which is I can walk into a dark, pitch black room and I can light a little candle, a little match. When I light that match, the flicker of the flame, the light, dispels the darkness, right? I walk in, I can see the whole outline of the room in a second as soon as I light the match, because the power of the light is so much greater than the darkness. But it's not even possible for me to walk into a bright room with a little piece of darkness. I can't even walk into the possibility doesn't exist. I can't even walk into a bright room with a little piece of darkness because when the lights are on, darkness doesn't exist, it's gone. And so the more that we build that muscle of living aligned with the world of connection, with the light, with giving, with building, with loving, with feeling connected to myself and others in a higher power, to that degree, I am unstoppable. I am in the light. Nothing can get to me. I am resilient, which is what I want to get to. How do we build resilience? But that is really the essence of all of Judaism, which is wild, because talk about protecting of mental health. There is nothing that can protect you more. There's nothing that can protect you more than living in the light, especially when you're feeling the dark, right? To align yourself with the light. So it's a very deep concept. Usually I give at least 5 to 6 classes on it. And for those that want to hear more, I'm going to be giving a workshop, which is coming across the bottom of your screen right now, this Thursday, for 5 tips to beat anxiety using this kind of a model. We'll talk about practical tips and applying it to your personal life. Because right here, we can't do that as easily. So if you really are interested in this and want to hear more, which hopefully you do, because it inspired me enormously as a psychologist coming in, learning about Judaism and Torah, go to olami.org/sold workshop. olami.org/sold workshop. We're giving a free webinar workshop on Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for East Coast Americans, and also 8 p.m. on Wednesday for South Africa and Israel, 8 p.m. local time for South Africa and Israel. They're on the same time zone for anyone in South Africa and Israel, because we have a global audience, which is really exciting. So I just wanted to just mention the idea that, and I want to open up to you guys, the role of connecting to a higher power as far as how it affects our mental health, because this is a big one. It's not usually talked about. As a psychologist, it was always shush, don't go there. We don't go into the spiritual realm. You just stick with the psychological realm. Now that's helpful, but I really feel now that there's a piece missing, and that when people tap into that spiritual realm, it's so much more powerful. It just adds to everything else they're doing. And so we find that trusting in God is one of the best predictors for mental health. And there's a Dr. Rosmer and Dr. David Rosmer has a PhD in a lot of studies on this. You can look it up, about literally treating anxiety disorders with building your trust in God. Created 2 groups. One was, they're both treated the same with medications and group therapy, and one worked on their trust in God and the other didn't. They found really statistically significant results with those who are building their trust in a higher power in their treatment of their anxiety disorders. So I just wanted to open that up to you. What are your thoughts about that? What are your thoughts about trusting in God, mental health, the spiritual perspective of dealing with mental health? Yafa.
Okay, well, I love everything you said, Jackie. Thank you so much for all that insight. I am going to agree with you, and I'll tell you from my own. Can I get a little bit personal for a minute? So when I first got married, I'll talk very quickly because we're running out of time. When I first got married, I had a lot of adjustments, like many people do. My adjustment may have been more than some people. I moved to Israel. I grew up in New York, moved to Israel. I grew up Ashkenaz, married somebody who was Sephardic. I grew up American. He's Mexican. There were so many adjustments. I had no family, no friends. I left everyone and everything and moved to Israel. I was newly married, newly pregnant, newly bored, and the Intifada started in Israel. Buses blowing up all over the place, people dying, restaurants that I was in blew up the next day. Like, it was such craziness. And for the first time in my life, I developed this crazy level of anxiety that I never had before. I was that classic, like, always happy, always, I was never bullied in my life. I was never, like, I really was, I was just like, happy, and everything was pretty smooth in my life. Doesn't mean it was perfect. I, went through plenty of things, but I didn't even know what anxiety was. Okay, back then, most people didn't know what anxiety was, but I didn't even understand what I was going through. And my anxiety led to actually agoraphobia. Me, the big extrovert, I suffer from agoraphobia, which is a fear of open or crowded spaces. So could you imagine? I was so afraid to go out of my house, but I hated being alone. It was like such a craziness. Anyway, the point is that it was a very, very difficult thing that I went through those few years when I first got married in Israel, until it came to a point where, and again, I didn't even know what I had, and I couldn't talk to anyone. I didn't even share it with my husband. He didn't know to what extent, because I was too busy trying to be the perfect wife, couldn't share these things with him. I needed to be that, what we call in Hebrew, the Eshet Chayil. Anyway, so, but bottom line is, at a certain point, I started realizing, I said, I grew up religious. I grew up keeping Shabbat. I grew up keeping kosher. I woke up like this, okay? But I thought to myself, I do all these things, but do I actually have a relationship with God? I don't know. Like, I didn't feel God in my daily activities. I didn't ever feel like I had an actual conversation with him. I didn't feel like I actually had a relationship with him. And that's when I realized, I think I need to work on my relationship with God. Just because I keep the mitzvot, just because I keep Shabbat, just because I eat kosher, doesn't mean I have a relationship with him. And as soon as I started learning more about what it means to trust God and to put yourself into his hands, all of a sudden, it wasn't overnight. Obviously, it took weeks and months and then a few years, but my anxiety lifted, my depression lifted, my agoraphobia was gone. And all of this only because I developed a relationship with Hashem. Now, disclaimer, thank God this was not clinical anxiety. This was situational. Okay, so I know that if there is a chemical imbalance, of course, medication is needed. But so I would say that the many of us have situational anxieties, that we're able to really control of by understanding our relationship with God. And I just, if you don't mind, I'll throw in one quick thing, this idea of what you were saying before about perspective, because to me, what I was able to understand then and carry with me throughout, which is why I wasn't that affected in the pandemic as some other people were, in this sense, because I already worked on those muscles so much beforehand that when you develop those muscles, you're able to just embrace the next level that comes to you, in your life. So when it comes to mindset, I was noticing now that it's an incredible thing that if you have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset, right? People with a fixed mindset tend to spiral down on two words, and people with a growth mindset tend to elevate on two words, and they're the exact same two words, right? What if? For somebody with a fixed mindset, what if becomes everything that might go wrong. For somebody with a growth mindset, what if becomes everything that might go right. And when you go from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, you flip your anxiety into possibility, right? So that was one important aspect. This is actually what resilience is all about. Resilience doesn't just mean bouncing back up when you fall down. Resilience means bouncing forward. It means I fell down. This is what happened to me. Things were a little too overwhelming. Things were a little too difficult. I fell down. But I'm going to get up and I'm going to move forward, not just stand in my place again. And I think that the bottom line of resilience goes back to what we were saying before about self-love. The bottom line of resilience means that I am thinking outside of myself. If we fall down and we don't get up again, or if we get into that fixed mindset, and which is what creates a lot of anxiety, we're too self-focused. We're too focused on our needs as opposed to the bigger. Because if we would understand the essence of who we really are, and what we could accomplish, and what we're here to do, and how many people in the world need to see our talents and need us to give to them and to teach them and to be there for them, then we would never stay stuck where we are, because we have so much to do and so much to accomplish. And that's how we will be able to really pick ourselves up and continue moving forward. And just to have this idea in mind, this understanding that both optimism and anxiety require us to imagine something that hasn't happened yet. But if we have the ability to worry about the future, we also have the ability to imagine a better one. Beautiful. So we just flip that switch in the mindset. That's what I think is the key to resilience and the key to getting rid of anxiety and flipping it to possibility.
Amazing. Okay, so on that note, we are going to throw out a soul challenge for the week, which is, what can you do? What are 3 things that you can do this week to increase your resilience, your mental health resilience, your emotional resilience? Of all the things we spoke about so many things tonight, which I loved. I got some ideas myself, Yafa, about mental resilience. We talked about the mindset. We talked about life purpose, Adina, connecting to what you're meant to be doing in your life, and even how do you start working that out. That's a whole other show. I'd love to do a show on life purpose. Also, talking about physical, what are some self-care things we can do that build our resilience and able to us to continue. And of course, the spiritual, building a relationship with a higher power, understanding, the fact that we can't control things, and that's okay. I can control my response to things, but I can't control things. Learning to accept that rather than fight it, not having our expectations, and then dealing with the reality and the differences, our level of suffering, being able to accept what's going on, go with the flow. These are all different ways we can build our resilience, and many, many more. So we look forward to hearing from you in the Soul group. Go to the Soul group, the Facebook group. We'd love to continue the conversation, hear from you. What are you doing this week to build your resilience? And anyone else, Yafa, Adina, thank you so much. Adina, do you have any final last parting words, blessings for people as they go?
I would say that I use 6 magic words. 6 magic words when it comes to resilience, and it's don't be worried, just be curious. And I use this all the time. Like, we have such a small understanding of how God runs the world and how he has an influence in our lives. We stare at this closed door and we're so upset. And if we just, instead of staring at the closed door, look around for open doors, don't be worried, just be curious. What on earth does he have in mind for me now? Say it over and over again, ladies. Don't be worried, just be curious. That's one of the things you can take throughout the week, even as small as trying to find a parking spot and it's not there. Don't be worried, just be curious.
Well, I am so curious about what's for dinner, so I'm going to go and see what's for dinner. On that note, guys, thank you. Keep it real. See you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.